the letter, she reads this letter. And her words are very interesting in this regards. The Quran highlights that when she reads this letter, she turns to her advisors and she says that indeed I have been given inni ulqiya ilayya kitabun kareem, that I've been given a very noble letter. Now the Quran highlights here that she attributes this letter as kareem, as noble. Why is that? It's a very harsh letter, but yet she, at the end of the day, says that this kitab is kareem, is noble. Here the Mufassirin came and they said that there are two interpretations that can be given. The first interpretation is literal and the second is figurative. Literal interpretation is that the kitab that Suleiman sent was a wonderful letter that he sent. You can imagine when a king sends a letter, it's a noble letter, the way it's written with nice calligraphy. It has, for example, certain borders. Maybe there's a fragrance associated with it. Maybe there was a delegation that was sent along with it, with the hudhud. Who knows? It was a noble letter, and that physically the letter was a good letter. It was a very appealing letter. The figurative message is that she knew of Suleiman. Yeah, the Mufassirin highlight this point very clearly. They say Suleiman's reputation was very much known within the world. That he was a noble king, a reputable king. She knew of Suleiman, but he did not know of her. So when she knew of Suleiman, she knew that this was a king, this was a very powerful king. He had control over the jinn, he had control over insan, he had control over the birds, and so on and so forth. So when this letter was delivered to her, she knew that Suleiman, number one, was a good king. He was a king who was known as Kareem. You know, when we have certain individuals in the community who are known as Kareem, it means that they're very generous. If you have, for example, any financial problems, you would refer to a person who is Kareem, because you know that he will never let you down in one way or another. He will always support you financially in one way or another. So she knew of Suleiman's reputation of being Kareem, and a letter that comes from a person who is known as Kareem is also associated as Kareem as well. So when she reads this letter, she turns to her advisors. She says, what do you suggest I should do? Now here the advisors, the Quran beautifully highlights, number one, her position as a queen, her position as a leader. And she was an amazing leader, to say the least, because of the decisions that she makes. At the same time, her advisors, the Quran highlights their fellowship. You know, at times, sometimes we talk about leadership skills. We always focus on leadership skills, how to train people to be leaders. And sometimes we have to follow, or we have to create an idea within our communities of how to be good followers as well. And there are certain etiquettes of being good followers. Her advisors were good followers in one way or another because they came to her and they said, look, we as advisors, we can only advise. We will tell you what to do, perhaps, but at the end of the day, the decision is all yours. It's in your hands entirely. We have a strong military power. We have a fortitude, wealth and weapons and armor and all of these things. We can give a good fight to Suleiman. If Suleiman insists to invade our lands, then we should defend. But ultimately, you are the queen, you are the leader, you make the decision at the end of the day. She says no. If we were to engage in fight, then there is nothing productive that will come from it. Whenever two nations get into a fight, when there is a battle or a war between two nations, usually there is unnecessary bloodshed. Then there is, of course, a disequilibrium that's created within the community, within society. Many families are left without husbands, without fathers. Then there is poverty. Then all of these things happen within a nation, simply because two people or two nations engage in a war between themselves. She says, قالت إن الملوك إذا دخلوا قرية أفسدوها. When the kings enter a piece of land, they cause fasad and fitna within these lands. وجعلوا عزة أهلها أذلة. Then those who are of the noblest of positions, they are made or they are humiliated. Then, with all of the different repercussions and ramifications of war take place within that particular society. وَكَذَلِكَ يَفْعَلُونَ. This is what they do. The last thing we need to do is get into a war with Suleiman. So they said to her, what do we do instead? She said, I'll send him a hadiyah. وَإِنِّي مُرْسِلَةٌ إِلَيْهِمْ بِحَدِيَّةٍ. I'll send him a hadiyah. Now remember, a hadiyah from one king to another, especially in that time, isn't a small box wrapped in a very beautiful way with a ribbon on top. No, it was a massive qafila that was sent towards Suleiman alayhi salam. According to the narrations, some of the Mufassirin highlight this. They said that when she sends a hadiyah, a gift towards Suleiman, some of the things involved within this gifts was that she sent 500 slave males and 500 slave females as a gift, as a token of appreciation, as a token of respect towards Suleiman alayhi salam. Furthermore than this, there were certain jewels, certain clothing, some of the high expensive things that you and I would usually be aware of. All of these things were sent, and a massive qafila was sent. The head of the qafila, she came towards him and she said, look, when you approach Suleiman and you offer these gifts as a token of respect, observe his face. See how he reacts. If he gets angry, then note it down. If he gets happy, note it down. If he gets upset, however he reacts, just examine his behavior and then come back and report back to me. So the head of this qafila then left. He left Yemen, which was the place where her kingdom was established, and he headed all the way to Sham. Sham, Palestine, this area was where Suleiman was located. So when they were heading towards Sham, some of the messengers came towards Suleiman. They said that there is a caravan, it's on its way towards you. When the caravan came towards the kingdom of Suleiman alayhi salam, they enter the lands and they go straight to the palace. When they meet Suleiman alayhi salam, the head of the qafila, in his mind, has envisaged the entire scenario, that he will come, he will gift Suleiman alayhi salam. Suleiman will become happy with all of these wonderful gifts, and he will accept them with open arms, welcome them, host them for a few days, and then perhaps send them back with a few gifts of his own. When he approaches Suleiman alayhi salam, Suleiman, without any expression, there is no expression, there is no emotion, he rejects these gifts entirely. He says, what is this? You bribe me with such gifts? This hadiyah means a lot to you. All of this gold and this silver and these gems and these attires and these slaves, these mean a lot to you, but they don't mean anything to me. It says, what is this in comparison to what Allah has given me? Allah has given me nabuwwah. Allah has given me ilm. Allah has given me knowledge and wisdom. In comparison to all of these worldly things, there is no equivalent. He rejects their gifts entirely. In fact, some of the Mufassirin, they highlight here that Suleiman alayhi salam expressed a bit of anger. Why anger? When you look at the idea of world leaders giving gifts to one another, we have this even in this day and age as well. When there's a delegation that's sent from one country to another, usually they go bearing gifts. So one world leader will give another gift to another world leader, for example. Well, what's the whole point of giving gifts? If you read between the lines, the whole purpose of giving gifts is to build a relationship, isn't it? And if you read even beyond the lines, what you realize is one world leader is indirectly telling another that, look, you have your empire, we have our empire, you have your culture, we have our culture, you have your religion, we have our religion. Here's a token of our respect, a token of appreciation. You mind your business, we'll mind our business. Whatever happens within our lands, we'll deal with it. Whatever happens within your lands, we won't interfere. This was between the lines. This is what the Queen of Sheba was expressing to Suleiman alayhi salam through these gifts. This is how he interpreted it. So he was angered by it. The Queen of Sheba basically told Suleiman, his gifts, whatever happens in your kingdom, it's your responsibility. Whatever happens in my kingdom, it's our responsibility. In one way or another, she was telling Suleiman, you mind your business, we'll mind our business. Of course, when it comes to the idea of shirk, you find that the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take this very personally. And so he rejects these gifts entirely and he expresses anger. How dare she? When they worship the sun, I cannot turn a blind eye to this. And so he takes it as an offense. The second reason why he expresses anger, it's also very beautiful, is that, you see, the Quran highlights that whenever a prophet comes towards a nation, a prophet will come towards his particular qawm and say, Inni Rasulallah. I am a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Believe in the idea of Tawheed, worship Allah, follow me as a prophet. There is a day of judgment. This is essentially the usul ad-din. The natural response that would come from the people, from the nation, would be, well, hold on a second. If you're a prophet of Allah, if you prove, or if you show, or if you're telling us that there is only one God, then what evidence do you have to show us that you're a prophet? Upon which the prophet would either show a miracle in one way or another. This is the natural method of how a particular incident would take place. A prophet would come, they would then be asked to show evidence to their prophethood. Here, Bilqis, when she sends a hadiyah to Suleiman, Suleiman, remember, tells her that he is a prophet and that they should come towards the religion of Islam. Bilqis, in one way or another, sends a hadiyah. This was an insult. Why? Because she had no interest in knowing the truth. She didn't ask Suleiman, what's your evidence to show me that you're a prophet of Allah? She just sent gifts immediately. Mind your business, we'll mind our business. So he took great insult in this. The reason being is because the queen of Saba, the queen of Sheba, had no interest in knowing the truth, let alone submitting to the truth. So when he rejects these gifts, they go back to the queen of Sheba. When the delegation returns to the lands of Yemen, they approach her and they tell her that Suleiman alayhi salam expressed a bit of anger and he rejected all of these gifts. She then prepares a kafil of her own and she then makes her way towards Suleiman alayhi salam. The messengers, they come towards Suleiman alayhi salam and they say that the queen herself, Bilqis, is on her way. Upon which the ayat of the Holy Quran in Surah An-Naml indicate the incident of the throne. Now here Suleiman alayhi salam turns to some of his key advisors and he says to them, Bilqis, the queen of Saba, is on her way. When she comes, I want to examine and I want to test her with regards to her own power and her own kingdom. How intelligent is this woman? Which from amongst you, my key advisors, is able to bring me her throne? A jinn stands up from amongst the company who goes by the name of Ifrit. He says, Suleiman, I will bring you the throne before you stand up from your seat. Now that could be a second, for example. I can immediately stand up at this moment in time. Or I could stand up after I've done with my work, an hour later, maybe 2 hours later. Those who work 9 to 5 on a desk, maybe 4 or 5 hours it could take you to stand up from your seat. Whatever it is, he says, I will bring you the throne before you even stand up from your seat. And I am strong. Suleiman says, no. I want it quicker than that. A man, قال الذي عنده علم من الكتاب. A man stands up, a normal human being like you and I. He stands up and he says, I will bring it قبل أن يرتد طرفك. قبل أن يرتد إليك طرفك. I will bring the throne before your eyes flutter. And within a moment, an instant moment, Suleiman saw that the throne of Sheba, the throne of the queen of Saba, was right beside him. Now what's interesting is that the ayah, after he sees the throne of Bilqis next to him, he says, هَذَا مِن فَضْلِ رَبِّ. This is from the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِيَبْلُوَنِي أَنْ أَشْكُرُ أَمْ أَكْفُرُ. Allah is testing me now. Do I turn to Him in gratitude or do I show my ingratitude towards Him? And then He says, وَمَنْ شَكَرَ فَإِنَّمَا يَشْكُرُ لِنَفْسِهِ. The one who turns to Allah in gratitude for whatever he has from health and wealth and prestige and influence within this world. Whoever turns to Allah and says, Ya Allah, shukr alhamdulillah, that benefit comes to my own self. I benefit from thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَإِنَّ رَبِّي غَنِيٌّ كَرِيمٌ. Allah is not in need of my gratitude, nor is Allah affected if I turn away from Him in ingratitude. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is needless of me, and I need to understand that. Here Suleiman in a single sentence highlights the importance of Tawheed, highlights the whole fundamentals of Tawheed in a single line. That we are constantly in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah is never in need of us. that whatever we do, we support ourselves in ibadah. Allah is not in need of our ibadah, in need of our worship. So when he does this, now here a number of questions arise. The first question is, Suleiman alayhi salam, he could have definitely got the throne himself. Why does he ask someone to bring the throne for him? The answer is, according to the theologians and the mufassirin, they explain that the reason why Suleiman asked someone to bring the throne for him was to highlight to the people who his wasi would be after him. A very fundamental aqaidi point that needs to be mentioned is that every prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the very beginning of their message, they made it clear to their people who their wasi would be. But just in case if they were to leave this world, it would not be ambiguous for the people to ask the question, who is the wasi of the prophet? They would all know who exactly the wasi is. When it comes to Musa, Musa made it known that Yusha ibn Nun would be his wasi. Dawood made it clear that Suleiman would be his wasi. Suleiman here made it clear that Asif ibn Barkhia, the name comes up in many of the different riwayat, would be his wasi. Likewise in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Inna hadha akhi wa wasiyyi wa khalifati min ba'di. When does he mention these words? He mentions these words in the very beginning of his message, Dhul Ashira. When he brings his family members together, yes, the first instant when he publicly goes and performs tabligh, announces his prophethood to the people publicly for the first time, it was in that sitting that he has already appointed his wasi. So from the very beginning, you find that the Holy Prophet of Islam, as well as all the other prophets, they made it clear who their wasi would be. Here, Suleiman wanted to make it clear to the people that his wasi is Asif ibn Barkhia. The second question arises, says, why does Suleiman take something that belongs to someone without asking their permission? If I was to take something that belongs to you without asking your permission, it would cause your displeasure. Likewise here, why does he take the throne of Sheba without asking her permission? Here the ulama said, well, it's not the idea of him taking her throne out of hawa, out of his own desires. Says no, it was his way of performing tabligh. It was his way of introducing hidayah to the heart of Bilqis. So he takes the throne from one land to another. Asif ibn Barkhia, according to some narrations, they say that in an instant moment, he folds the earth. He steps into the throne of Bilqis. Some narrations mention that the throne of Bilqis was surrounded by many guards. It was within a vault-like room, guarded in many different aspects. The building itself was structured in such a way that it was very difficult for people to come in and come out. Asif ibn Barkhia folded the earth. He walked into the courtroom of Bilqis, took the throne, and came back to the courtroom of Suleiman alayhi salam. Now, when the throne was there next to him, he thanks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the power that he's been given. Then he commands his people to adjust the throne, to alter the throne, to modify, to change the color here and there, to take certain things out, put certain things in, to change it from what it was before. Now when Bilqis enters the scene, when she enters the empire of Suleiman, she goes towards the throne, she goes towards the courtroom, the palace of Suleiman, and she enters. Suleiman welcomes her. They begin to have a discussion. Whilst they're having a discussion, he enters the room where her throne is. Then he turns to her. He says, answer me one question. She says, what is it? He says, look at that throne over there. Is your throne similar to that throne? A very interesting phrase of words, a choice of words. He phrases the question in such a way. He doesn't say, is that your throne? He says, is your throne similar to that throne? She looks at the throne and she doesn't say, yes, it's my throne. Nor does she say, no, it's not my throne. She says, my throne is very similar to it. It's as if my throne is like it. Then, upon further inspection, she realizes that it's her throne. Imagine, the throne of a king is unique. The way it's designed, the way it's shaped. You know that there is not another king in this world who has a similar throne. So she knew the way it was shaped and the way it was, even though the colors were different, even though certain jewels probably missing from it, it was definitely her throne. when she sees her throne sitting alongside Suleiman alayhi salam, she realizes the power of Suleiman. She realizes the miracle of Suleiman. This was in fact the miracle of Suleiman. This was his way of verifying to her the veracity of his nabuwah. It was his way of showing to her or telling her that I am indeed a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She then, as accordance to the ayat of the Holy Quran, she submits to the message of Islam. She turns to him and she says, the moment you rejected my hadiyah, it was a time when I had said to myself that this is indeed a person who only cares about religion and cares about the worship of Allah. I had followed you, I had accepted your message back then. There was no need for you to take my throne and perform this miracle for me. They say that they continue in their discussion, they enter another room. When they enter another room, there is a pond, a stream. When she approaches this pond, she begins to lift her skirt up to her shins. What are you doing? She says, I'm going to walk on this water. I don't want to get my attire wet. Suleiman says to her, there's no need for that. Just walk. When she approaches the water, she walks on top of the stream. She realizes that there was crystal underneath her feet that was invisible. She couldn't see it. It was so thin, yet sturdy, it could hold her weight and the weight of others as well. When she realized the advancement of technology that was available to Suleiman alayhi salam, that no other king, no other queen, no other kingdom had access to, it further solidified her iman in Suleiman alayhi salam. And this is how she came towards the folds of Islam. Question is raised, does she marry Suleiman? According to the narrations, no, she doesn't marry Suleiman alayhi salam. She goes back to Yemen. She marries a man by the name of Tabba, who was one of the royalties in Yemen, and she rules her kingdom. Suleiman rules his kingdom as well. But they all came towards the fold of Islam. Now the Quran in Surah As-Saba begins to speak about the final moments of Suleiman's life. Suleiman has now become an old man. When he becomes an old man, he comes towards, for example, his final days. He tells his close wuzara that I will enter my chambers. I will honor this day. I will try and seek happiness on this day. For many days, many years, many decades, I have ruled this empire. Let me enjoy this day. When he enters, he locks his chambers, and he just stands there. He stands there on his walking stick. It was a stick that he was leaning on. And a young, very beautiful, handsome man enters his chambers. He turns to him. He says, who are you? How did you get access to this room? Upon which he says, I am Israel. I am Malik al-Maut. Suleiman says, how ironic is it that today I decided to have a day off to enjoy my final moments, and Allah chooses for me to leave this world. Malik al-Maut takes his ruh. When he takes his ruh, the ayat of the Holy Quran explains that Suleiman stood as he was. So he remained standing. He was leaning on his stick. But those who were observing from outside thought that Suleiman alayhi salam was alive. But in reality, he was dead. His body was lifeless as he was leaning on the stick. So the ulama asked the question, for how long was Suleiman standing on the stick? Because he was standing for a considerable while. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded a termite to come and eat the wood. The wood then breaks, Suleiman's body falls on the floor, and that's how the people find out that he had passed. So how long was he standing in that position? Some narrations say maybe a year, some say a month, some say a few days, some say one day. Ayatollah Nasir Makarim Shirazi, Hafadahullah, he says it is impossible to think that Suleiman was in that position for more than a day. Suleiman is a man, he needs food, he needs a drink, he needs to go use the washroom. Someone may have known that he has passed. Beyond a day, it's impossible for them to ignore his needs, the needs of Suleiman. He's surrounded by people constantly, by his maids and his wives and so on and so forth. It's impossible for them not to know that Suleiman alayhi salam has passed. But what the historians mention is that his close confidence, the likes of Asif ibn Barkhiyah, the narrations mention that in the final years of Suleiman's life, Asif ibn Barkhiyah officially takes on the rulership. He becomes a king of the empire. Suleiman goes into the back lines, in the sidelines, but then Asif comes into the forefronts and he rules actively. So when he enters the chambers, Asif knew that Suleiman had passed. But he was waiting on Allah's command to then release the news to the public. The ayah is very interesting because the ayah says that even the jinn, when they saw Suleiman, they did not know that Suleiman had passed. And Allah makes it a point to mention that even the jinns do not have ilm al-ghayb. You know, some of us who have access to the jinns, we ask all sorts of questions to jinns, as if they have ilm al-ghayb. This ayah of the Quran proves that even the jinn have no knowledge of the unseen. One of the greatest things that we learn in Suleiman's life is the fact that he was a king. He had all of the desires in his hands, but never did he let these desires overpower his aql. Never did he let his desires overpower his religiosity, his spirituality. He always had authority over his desires. Who else had authority over the desires? It was none other than Abu Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam. When he enters the river, 3 days without drinking any water, he now has water in his hands. But then he throws away that water. It wouldn't have been haram for him to drink that water, but he throws it away. He says, Ya nafsi min ba'd al-Husayn huni. He says, O self, how dare you drink this water when your master is in need of this water? They say that after the events of Karbala takes place, Hamid ibn Muslim narrates, he says, a young girl came towards me. When I saw the tents of the women burning, a young girl came towards me. She said to me, Ya Sheikh, help me, take me towards the lands of Najaf. I said to her, my child, the lands of Najaf are far, is far. Who's there in the lands of Najaf? There's no one there in the lands of Najaf. She says, no, I heard my Aunt Zainab say to me that there is a grave in Najaf. Whosoever comes and approaches this grave, Allah, they will see a response come from this grave. Oh man, take me towards the lands of Najaf. Let me come to this grave and I want to complain to this person what they did to us. He says to her, he says, oh child, the lands of Najaf is too far. I cannot take you to the lands of Najaf. She says, so be it, then take me towards the Furat. Take me towards the river. He says to her, come my child, I'll take you towards the Furat. When he takes Sakina towards the waters, when she approaches the river Furat, she sees a body alongside the Furat. She comes closer, she sees that it's her uncle Abu Fadl al-Abbas. She runs towards his body, she embraces his body. She cries and she laments, she says, oh my uncle, look what they did to us after you left us. Oh my uncle, stand and rise and protect us the way you would do so. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Saya'lamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalabin yanqalibun. Surah al-Mubarakat al-Fatiha.